All right, we begin the final hour of Fox and Friends with a Fox News alert. The Israeli Defense Forces troops have located and recovered, sadly, the bodies of 6 hostages found in Gaza just days ago. That does include American Hirsch Goldberg Poland, according to an IDF spokesman. The hostages were found, quote, brutally murdered, possibly a day or two before IDF troops found them.
Hamas abducted all 6 on October 7th, and their remains were found inside a tunnel in Gaza. Goldberg, Poland, and 4 others were kidnapped during the Nova Music Festival in October.
President Biden releasing a statement about Goldberg, Poland's death overnight, saying, quote, I am devastated and outraged. I have gotten to know his parents, John and Rachel. They have been courageous, wise, and steadfast, even as they have endured the unimaginable.
And it really is. It is. When I woke up this morning, was reading about this story. The most difficult thing to hear and to read is that they were alive until just a couple of days ago. They were hostages. They've endured hell in the hands of a evil terrorist organization, and then they were savagely executed, shot presumably, as Israeli troops were getting closer. We don't know if they were at the door or in the neighborhood or they're anticipating it. But clearly, their Hamas captors thought they were better off dead if they were hoping to get away, and it underscores the savagery of Hamas.
I guess there was a hostage not that long ago who was in a similar situation, and the Hamas terrorists fled and left that person alive, and so there was hope that might happen, but that is not what happened. Meanwhile, back in March, Kamala Harris, who hasn't yet, that we know of, weighed in on this latest execution of these hostages, did weigh in on what she thought about the Rafah offensive and saying it would be a mistake to do that. Listen.
We have been clear in multiple conversations and in every way that any major military operation in Rafah would be a huge mistake. Let me tell you something. I have studied the maps. There's nowhere for those folks to go. And we're looking at about 1.5 million people in Rafah who are there because they were told to go there, most of them. And so we've been very clear that it would be a mistake to move into Rafah with any type of military operation.
Actually, Kamala has weighed in, and here's what she had to say. I think we're going to put that up.
We may not have it. We'll have that in a moment.
Okay.
So she's weighed in, but she's been weighing in for a long time. And in some of the people, well, here it is. Here's the statement.
There we go.
I strongly condemn Hamas' continued brutality, and so must the entire world. As vice president, I have no higher priority than the safety of American citizens, wherever they are in the world.
Yeah, how much of that, number one, what's the substance there? But, I mean, you really hang on that word about American citizens, no matter where they are in the world. Well, her administration has pressured Israel to give this fight up. What have we done to get our Americans home? Maybe behind the scenes, I don't know. I try to be optimistic, but it's hard to when you see an administration abandon our guys and gals in Afghanistan, and now it looks like they're just using this as an opportunity to score political points by telling Bibi he needs to get a ceasefire.
Well, by the way, this administration has been working behind the scenes against Bibi Netanyahu, too. You can have your political differences, but after October 7th, they've tried to leverage that. Gallant, the defense minister, there's a lot of reporting that the American administration is behind him and his efforts to take on Bibi Netanyahu. They've been trying to tell Israel where they can and cannot raid. I do like the example of, imagine after 9/11, if some country was to tell us, oh, you can't go to that town in Iraq or that town in Afghanistan. We'd say, go pound sand. We can go wherever we want for retribution for what happened to our people on 9/11. I think that's the same feeling a lot of Israelis have about this administration trying to tell them what targets they can hit. Oh, you can go to Rafah, but you can't go over here. That's not how you defeat savage terrorists.
Well, actually, the execution of the war is under debate in Israel right now because many of the families of the hostages would like to see their loved ones being the priority and getting a ceasefire agreement versus trying to destroy Hamas before they're able to save their loved ones. So I know we talked a little bit about Rafah because that's been in debate, and I think it's helpful, Pete, if you could go and show us on the map what we're looking at.
Rafah is a big sticking point. It really is, to the idea of any sort of a ceasefire with Hamas, if that's truly what they want, now that they're executing hostages. So you've got Israel here and Egypt. This is the Sinai Peninsula. We've got the Gaza Strip. Initially, the attacks coming out of there on October 7th. So Israel's been clearing for over 300 days portions of the Gaza Strip. Rafah is the crossing into Egypt. They've found a huge tunnel network there, over 500 tunnels, 50 of which, at a minimum, lead between the Gaza Strip and Egypt. That is the lifeline for Hamas. Weapons, people. You can even move. There's some reporting potentially that hostages could have moved back and forth. So it's not even clear that all the hostages necessarily are in Gaza. Right now, as of May, Israel controls Rafah, and they control a specific crossing point where most of that had happened. And Hamas, of course, is demanding that Israel shouldn't be able to be there. So Hamas is saying, if we are going to get a ceasefire, Israel has to leave Rafah. And Benjamin Netanyahu is saying, well, why would we give up the one place where we can control whether our enemy gets refit with more supplies? And that's the sticking point right now.
And we talked about, though, really quick, Joey, that there's another place where we could exert pressure, and that is from Egypt, where we also, just like we give Israel a lot of money, and that's why we kind of also exert some control over how they operate, because this could lead, this is a tinderbox. I mean, it could lead to a World War III situation, and of course that would involve us. But also
Egypt's been playing that shell game for a long time.
I know, we give a lot of money to Egypt. You talked about those tunnels. Why aren't we telling Egypt to do something about those tunnels and holding our own foreign aid as a leverage
I wish we should, and I don't know why we're not. Ultimately, this crossing point, Egypt doesn't want that problem coming onto their territory. You would see massive refugee camps in the Sinai Peninsula. They talk a big game about wanting to help the Palestinian people in their plight, but they don't want to let them into Egypt in another place out of this war zone. You see, Hamas wants the people bottled up in Gaza. If the people are bottled up in Gaza, it's more civilian shields and targets that they can use for their propaganda purposes. If Egypt allows them out, then ultimately it's, you've just got fighters in that area, and it's a very different dynamic for Hamas.
With the map, people, I think it is important. Israel started the offensive in the north.
Correct.
And pushed south. So the idea that they would never go into Rafah makes no sense, because the enemy went to Rafah.
So did, and the argument Hamas and the UN and others are making is, well, as the enemy went south, so did the civilian population, right? And so it becomes a thicker and more difficult fight. But no doubt Rafah was an end state that Israel wanted to achieve. They got there in May. They've been holding it, preventing people from going back and forth, which puts a stranglehold on Hamas, making everything more desperate. Maybe that leads, guys, to a hostage negotiation eventually. But Israel also assassinated Hamas's chief negotiator in Tehran, who's taking orders from Iran also. So this is all super complicated.
Well, and in all these ceasefire agreements that have been put on the table, I remember one of them was Israel had kind of created a line across Gaza that they were securing, and Hamas said, well, we'll do this deal if we control that line. Well, Israel had to control that line in order to let civilians go back north so the invasion in Rafah wouldn't be as detrimental. So all along the way, Hamas has undermined Israel's attempts to make a safer place for the civilians.